my name is Carleigh. I am a holistic mental wellness coach. And essentially, that means that I help people to heal their mind without using medication. So, my specialties are helping people to overcome anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder without using any medication. And I know this works because I've done it myself. And I am, with these diagnoses, I'm happy, healthy, healed, and I don't take any pharmaceuticals for my mental health. And I haven't since I was 18 years old and using ADHD meds in university. So, where you can find me, a great place to get started is on my website. I have a free guide that's called The First Step Towards Overcoming Anxiety. And my website is Manas, that's MANAS, mastery.com. And my Instagram is the same, manas.mastery.
Perfect. So take us from the very beginning. You mentioned you battled ADHD. Well, not I shouldn't say battled. You were going through ADHD and some other mental health related situations. So tell us, how did you get into this and why?
Well, if you want to go back to the proper beginning, that really starts when I was 12 years old and had actually planned on taking my own life. Nobody around me had any idea that I was struggling with such deep depression. And it looks very different in a child than it does in an adult. I used to like fake sick from school for 2 weeks at a time because I just didn't have the energy to get out of bed. I just wanted to lay in bed and watch TLC, watch Say Yes to the Dress and Cake Boss all day, and just not do anything. And it was a really, really dark time that I didn't actually know how serious it was until years later when I was studying psychology and reading about the statistics of, the percentage of people that actually think about suicide is surprisingly high, but the percentage of people that actually plan to attempt suicide is a lot lower. And I didn't realize like how severe that was until learning those and realizing, okay, what I went through was not normal. Um, when I kind of came out of the suicidal phase of my childhood, I was still really struggling with anxiety and depression for quite a few years after that, going in and out of eating disorders, struggling with substance abuse. I was drinking from a very young age and using cannabis, just self-medicating to try and, numb all of the negative emotions I was feeling, which I'm sure only made things worse because those things weren't helping me in the long run, but they gave me a temporary fix, which is, what I needed back then. And when I got to university, I had no diagnoses at this point, even though it was very clear that I had struggled with anxiety and depression. My parents were not aware, so we never actually got any help. We were all just, busy, didn't eat dinner together, like different extracurriculars and whatever else going on there. And when I got to university, I started having some friends question me about, do you have ADHD? Because my brother has ADHD and it kind of seems like you might. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know, like, what's that? I'd never really been aware of mental health. So I went to a walk-in clinic actually, which I really do not recommend if you're looking for mental health help. It was not a great experience. They gave me these questionnaires to fill out. And I go in saying, I think I might have ADHD. I'd like to be tested. And they give me these questionnaires, one for anxiety, one for depression. And I hadn't even mentioned those things, and one for ADHD. And it was no surprise that I tested positive for anxiety and depression, but I remember filling out this ADHD chart, and there are these different colored boxes ranging from white to light blue to dark blue. And the questions are like ranging from never, rarely, sometimes, often, always. And I fill out the questionnaire, answering as honestly as I can. And when I go to look it back over, I was like, okay, this mustn't be accurate. Like I must have been like cheating or something because all of my answers were in a dark blue box. And I read it over trying to like change something so it seemed a little bit less severe, I suppose, and there was nothing I could honestly change. And I just broke down in the doctor's office, started crying. And the doctor came back in and was like, oh, it's totally fine. Like, this is normal. Don't worry. Like, we'll give you some pills and you'll be sweet. And I was just really stigmatizing myself. Like, I was like putting this idea that I had this mental illness and this was now going to define me. And I had to take a pill every day to kind of be normal and fit into society's box of what it means to be a normal human. And it really didn't sit well with me. So kind of ironically, the idea that I had a mental illness actually sent me into a depression and trying to cope with that. I did use it was like Ritalin, I believe, something like a knockoff brand of Ritalin, for about a month and a half, but I really didn't like the way that it made me feel. I felt a little bit numb. I didn't have as much of an appetite. I didn't laugh as much. So I decided maybe this isn't for me. And I'm so grateful that in that time, I found that the university I was going to had an ADHD coach. And he just completely changed my world and my perspective on what it actually means to have a brain that functions a little bit differently, and how we can work with our specific mind to find, alternative ways of doing things. And for ADHD, alternative ways of being organized and staying focused. And that was my first kind of instance with mental health coaching. I had seen, I think I started seeing a counselor around that time as well. I'd maybe been seeing them a little bit earlier, just in university. But he really was a pivotal part of my healing journey and my first experience actually working with any sort of life coach. So a couple of years later, my mental health had continued to go in ebbs and flows, and I had accepted the ADHD as, a superpower that I had, but I still didn't have a hold on the anxiety and depression side of things. At times I would feel good. At times I would be really struggling. And university is very fast paced. You have projects and exams and lab reports and all of these things. There's always something that is due or that you need to be studying for. So when depression hits in university, it's really hard to get out of it, because now I've maybe missed a lab report, or I haven't studied for that exam that I have coming up, or it just, things pile on top of each other, which makes it even harder to, get through the workload and start to feel a little bit less overwhelmed. So that was coming, ebbs and flows, and as it goes. And just before entering my third year of university, I was going down to New Zealand on exchange. And I'm from Canada originally, live in Australia now, but most of my life was in Canada. And I had never left North America at this point, but I'd always wanted to travel. So this was like a huge deal. I was about to move across the world for a year, go to this amazing, mystical, mountainous country surrounded by the ocean. It was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me. And it actually triggered my first and only manic episode. So I had already experienced the anxiety and the depression, had been diagnosed with ADHD, which is actually very closely linked to bipolar. And now experiencing mania was basically confirmation that I do have bipolar disorder, which at the time, because I was so afraid of the potential of my mind, it was my biggest fear that I had bipolar disorder and that I was going to become some angry monster that lashes out and that can't control their emotions. And I just really didn't want that for myself. And when I experienced mania, I realized, okay, well, I've already seen as dark as it gets. I've been, at the point where I literally planned on ending my life. And if this is the opposite, I know that I can figure out how to stay somewhere in the middle and never hit either of those extremes again. So I did go to the hospital because I was having basically a panic attack with mania. And I was like, I just need someone to help me calm down right now. Like, I don't want to accidentally go into a casino and gamble all my money, because I feel like that could happen, because everything's too good to be true right now and it doesn't feel right. So I did handle the situation really well. But basically at that point, I realized I kind of had three choices. I could either take the pills that they were recommending, which I was very clear that I didn't want. I could do nothing and continue on this like roller coaster of mental health that my life had been, or I could find a way to truly heal. So of course I went with the third option. I went down to New Zealand and started just really prioritizing my mental health. I cut back significantly on drinking alcohol, started prioritizing my sleep and making sure I was exercising and being awake in the day, immersing myself in nature, spending time with beautiful humans. I did my yoga teacher training that year and just became obsessed with facing my fears. I shaved my head just because I knew it was going to be uncomfortable, but I wanted to face that challenge. And I was 19 at this point. And by the time that I was 20, maybe 21, I realized like, okay, I've only experienced mania that one time. I haven't fallen into a depression since then. I'm onto something here. And I knew at that very young age that it is my calling to guide others to find natural healing in the ways that I've been able to control my mind. So that was 8 or 9 years ago now. And I still, life is still like this, just like everybody's, but I haven't experienced mania again. I haven't had another deep depression. And I feel so empowered by the fact that I can live with these significant diagnoses, not take any medication, and still be a high functioning human. So that's kind of my life story of mental health from the beginning. And that's why I do what I do, because I know it's possible to find true healing. And it took me a long time to figure it out. And it's so wonderful to be in a position where I've created a program that cuts off a lot of the time and a lot of the guesswork for people to use this step-by-step strategy and truly find healing.
Your story reminded me of my time in school because that seems to be what triggered or what put you down the path of experiencing everything that you experience. And I think some people forget how difficult school can actually be, right? I remember elementary school was pretty okay because you're from Canada and I'm in Canada, so I know your experience because we look like we're roughly around the same age, right? I remember high school was so difficult for me because you're going through puberty, you're trying to understand if you're going to fit in, you try to navigate the world, and there's a lot of pressure on teenagers saying, okay, what is it that you want to do? How are you going to get into the world? Because you
Mm-hmm.
have that period of time where you're still under your parents' protection if you're still at home, but you know you're trying to set up your life to be something better or to grow into what you want to be. And then when you're at college and university, it's all you. You're an adult. You could drink, you can smoke, you could drive, you're probably sexually active. You could do all these things that are pretty much new to you. And there's a time, as I look back when you're sharing your story, where I was very confused and I didn't know where I wanted to go. And I wonder if I were to go to a doctor and say, hey, is it this anxiety? Is it
Mm.
depression? Is it confusion? I wonder if they would have said, Terrain, it is this. Terrain, it is that. But because it was so short lived and because I had other things going on that were a quote unquote distraction, I didn't actually prioritize my mental health in the
Mm-hmm.
way that you did. But the way that you did is fantastic because there's people who are suffering in other ways and they're going to put everything on the back burner. We'll say, okay, inflation is high, so I don't know where I'm going to eat. So I'm going to work as your mental health deteriorates and you don't realize it because something else is more on your mind than the other. The people that you work with, do you find sometimes that they're suffering, but they're not even aware of the suffering they're actually experiencing?
Definitely. I think that a lot of people have become comfortable just kind of feeling okay, and just accepting that maybe life isn't that great and I feel fine, so that's good enough. When in reality, we all deserve to feel joyous and confident and fulfilled and like we're living our best lives. And it is truly attainable for everyone to be living the life of their dreams. And I think that a lot of people just kind of accept that maybe they're never going to achieve their dreams or that they're out of reach or that, they're not worthy is a big one that comes up. I'm not worthy of, achieving whatever it is. Um, so I think that's probably more so, the people that I work with are in a place where they're ready to heal. They want to make that change. They're sick of not feeling well and they don't want to turn towards medications. They're like, give me the alternative. I want to put in the work. But I do often just out in public or I teach yoga as well, communicating with people at different events. It's funny to recognize people that kind of say like, oh, how are you? I'm okay. It's like, oh, well, what does that mean? Like, how is your mental health? And it's kind of, a lot of times people just kind of brush it off like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And it's like, well, it doesn't really seem like you're actually fine, or you wouldn't be answering me in that kind of way. Do you know what I mean? But when you're out of touch with your emotions, it's like being fine is just it's fine. You kind of just accept it and don't recognize that there's an alternative to feeling better.
Yeah, I take the answer as I'm fine as like if you're looking at like wavelengths, they're just coasting.
Mm,
They're just existing. So there's this joke that I do anytime someone says that they're okay, I go back with another word. So let's say, for example, Carleigh says, Train, I'm good. I say, I'm great. And then you feel like, okay, why is it? Then you'd say, okay, I'm great. Well, I'm magnificent. So I
mhm,
want to like escalate the type of words because for me, I don't accept fine. I'll challenge you, right? Anytime someone says they're fine, I'm okay, what makes you fine? What
mm,
is it about your day that is fine? Oh, okay, you know what? I'm feeling okay. Okay, what is about your day that's okay? Because if you can't answer it, I'm going to say, maybe you're not okay. Maybe you're
mm,
not fine, right? Because for me, if I'm having a fantastic day, I can tell you exactly why that day is fantastic. I woke up in the morning and I did 100 push-ups where previously my record was 95. So that's why I'm fantastic, right? I accomplished something. And that's what I want people to understand because to just coast through life these days isn't really doing anyone any benefit
mm,
because we don't know what you're going through because many people are suffering in silence,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's very painful. So when they get to you and they're looking to heal, what's maybe some of the commonalities that you see right at the beginning of their journey with you?
So a lot of times people are wanting to heal because they want to do better by maybe it's their kids or their partner, or they have a small business and they don't feel like they're fully showing up in these other areas of their life because they're struggling and they don't feel like they have that much to give because they need to be, giving themselves a little bit more. So a lot of the times it's people that, aren't necessarily wanting to heal for themselves exclusively, but wanting to heal because they can see that they're not as present with their children or with these people around them, and they don't want those relationships to suffer. Which I think is honestly like a really beautiful and selfless reason to desire healing. But the first thing that we actually always work on is self love, self compassion, self acceptance, and choosing to move forward with a healing journey from a place of I love myself and I deserve to feel better. I deserve to feel well. I deserve to feel my best. And in turn, that is going to benefit absolutely everyone around you because when you fill your own cup, you just have more to give when you can serve from that overflowing place versus when you're struggling and are trying to serve from an empty cup. Nobody gets as much as you could offer if you were already full. So that's often kind of the commonality is like people that they can feel that they're tired and that they're drained and they're like I want to do better by those around me and I know that means that I need to pick up my own self-care game and they're trying to figure out what that looks like.
They're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, right? I
Yeah.
think that's a fantastic reason, especially for those around you. I could just imagine like some of the women that I coach when they're upset because they're going through some of the trauma of their previous maybe relationships, friendships, of things of that nature. Sometimes that energy will lash out at others, and they'll
Mm,
say, "Okay, I need to take on this journey not only for me, but for my daughter, my son, my husband, my
right.
wife,
Mhm.
because they realize that the chaos that's surrounding them, the origins of it is themselves. Right? Is self reflection and self identification difficult for some of the people you deal with?
I am often very impressed by my clients. And I would say, is it difficult for some? Sure, probably. It's difficult for anyone who's just getting started if you don't have much of a connection with your emotions or if you've spent many years kind of repressing and ignoring them. But I'm actually so impressed with the people that I work with because they tend to be quite self-aware and quite aware of, I have these certain tendencies and I tend to lash out in these ways and then I feel horrible afterwards. And it's like they're aware of these things but haven't figured out how to actually control it in that moment. It's like the reflection is there after the fact. They're like, that didn't feel good. for me or the people involved. And I know I don't want to do that again, but I don't know how to make sure I'm not going to do that again. So it's like the reflection is there, but the next step is then like almost learning how to reflect before the reaction and move from a place of action instead of reaction. And that's the piece that I think is really challenging for a lot of people, is like taking that time when you feel an emotion coming up to not just let it take over and react, but to acknowledge it and say, okay, this is how I'm feeling. How can I act from a place of consciousness and think about what I'm about to say or do, or whatever that is in that situation, so that I am not going to say something or do something that I don't mean or that hurts someone in a way that I'm not intending.
That's such a mature evaluation of oneself. Because it would always be easier just to say that I'm not the problem, it's Carleigh. You're the monster
Mm,
that is triggering me to do this, right? Because if I'm going to say that I need to do this, like you said, right? I need to identify, why am I doing this to you? Why am I doing this to this person? And so on. That takes a lot of courage, because that's the difficult part. And you're probably well aware, when
yeah.
they get to you and they're ready to heal, they've probably done quite a bit of work already to even get to you, right? Because they
Mm.
identify there's a problem. And then for them to trust you like that, how does that make you feel, that they're trusting you to walk that journey with them?
It's definitely, I feel very honored when someone chooses me as their coach. And it's really, I feel so grateful when I meet people who have been on a somewhat similar journey to me, but maybe they're a few years behind and they've just received a diagnosis and they're not sure what to do. They don't want to turn towards medication. And we can have a conversation and really resonate with each other's stories. And it feels like I'm with, myself 10 years ago, who could have really used, this version of Carleigh's guidance when she was so lost and didn't know what to do and was really struggling with her mental health. And that's ultimately why I do what I do, because I want to make it easier for people who were in my shoes back then, or who are in my previous shoes now. So it feels so affirming, and I feel so grateful when I meet people who can witness what is possible through my transformation and then trust me to guide them along a similar journey. And it's also, I feel like a proud mom when my clients are taking strides and, taking their mental health into their own hands and doing the things that it actually takes to heal. And we come back to our coaching sessions and they tell me about all the wins they've had in the past fortnight and how they're implementing the strategies we've talked about. And I feel so proud and grateful to be guiding them on this journey.
When you look back on how far you've come and all the people that you helped, and you identify the younger version of yourself, are
Mm.
you surprised of how far you've come and the woman that you are growing into today?
I think younger Carleigh, maybe she would be surprised. She would definitely be very impressed and proud and inspired. And, I think me looking back, I wouldn't say that I feel surprised necessarily, because I've been there for the whole journey. I know how much work it has taken and how consistent and dedicated that I've been over the years. But I think, if I were to meet 12-year-old or 17, 18-year-old Carleigh, I think they would be very impressed and inspired at the woman that I've become, and grateful that I've taken the time to put in the work for the healing that younger me needed.
It's
Mm.
like when you line up that version of you and this version of you, there's probably traits in that person that you probably look back and say, okay, this got me to here. This was able to help me here. And there may be some things that you look back and you're saying, okay, I'm glad I got rid of that on my
Mm.
journey. Like when I look at my teens, as I mentioned, and the difficult time in high school, especially,
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out just the world. And that may be a lot for 13, 14, and 15-year-old to do, but that determination is what got me here. That focus is what got me to have conversations like with this
Hmm.
with you. There's a few things that I left behind, and one of them was maybe social distractions was I felt that I wanted to impress people because I
Yeah.
grew up so poor, right? So when I got a little bit money and I started working better jobs, I was like, okay, let's go. We're going to the club. I'm buying this, I'm buying that, right? And then I began to realize it didn't mean anything in the long run. My what I considered value and my worth, that's something that changed significantly. Did your
Mm.
outcome on things that you wanted to have valuable in your life, did that change along the journey as well?
100%. I mean, when I was much younger, like similar to you, but in a very different way, I wanted to impress people. And for me, that was very much like with my appearance. In high school, I was very, where I would take me 2 hours in the morning to get ready. I would shower with, shampoo, conditioner every day and blow dry and straighten my hair and put on a full face of makeup. And, I'm talking like I'm 15 years old. Like it's so unnecessary, but I thought that's what I needed to do to be liked and to be accepted in high school, which again, super weird, confusing time. We're going through puberty and, there's lots of attractive boys around. And that's what I thought I needed to feel validated was like affection from boys that I wanted them to look at me and think that I was beautiful and want to spend time with me. And I was really judgmental towards other people and how they looked and what they wore and how they did their makeup because I was so insecure and really wanted everyone's affirmation and everyone's acceptance, and yet I couldn't accept myself, and I couldn't accept a lot of people around me either. It was like the self-judgment was just like portrayed out into the world, and I was so nitpicky about just things that didn't matter at all. So that's something that I think I let go of at quite a young age, and I'm so grateful for that because I know a lot of people struggle with what they think other people are thinking about them. But when you actually take a step back and reflect on it, you realize that even if you have a passing judgment about someone, it's not as if that's what you're now thinking about for the rest of your day. It's not as if you're like fixated on this other person that doesn't really matter in your life. Everyone is only actually concerned about themselves. And when you realize that, it's like, what is the point of putting all of that effort in if it's just to impress other people that are only going to think about me for 2 seconds and then it doesn't matter anyways? So that's something that I really let go of was like my attachment to needing to look a certain way. And my confidence really grew from that because now, I mean, you can see I have my hair up in a bun. I'm not wearing any makeup. And this is how I go about my day pretty much every day. When it's hot, my hair is probably up and I don't think twice about it because I'm comfortable. And that makes me feel confident and able to go about the world in the way that I want to present myself. And it doesn't actually matter to me if someone else maybe judges me for not wearing makeup or for looking a certain way. Like it's not even a thought that I have anymore. Whereas at one time it was like what ruled my world was how I looked.
I was there as well. It was always on my mind. And I think the
Mm,
origins of that was because I grew up without anything. So money and presentation became was like sensitive to me, right? I didn't
mm,
want anyone to know that I was poor. But similar to you, a couple of years later, and I think I don't have the stats on this, but I know high school is a difficult time for a lot of people. I think
mm-hmm.
once you move out of that high school mentality, you're either going to have that way of thinking for the rest of your life. You probably know
Mm-hmm.
people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. They
Yeah.
still very worried about what other people say, right? And then there's other
Mm-hmm.
people like us who are in our 20s who just said, you know what? I want to be happy with myself. And then the
Mm-hmm.
opinions of other people didn't really matter because when we walk up and down the street, people don't care about us. They may look in
Yeah.
our direction, but they really don't care what we wear or what we
Mm-hmm.
think. We think they care.
Yeah.
They don't really care, right?
Not at all. And it's funny, you think about like if you're walking around at like the grocery store, for example, like you're not noticing really how other people are looking or what they're wearing unless you like something. Like for me, if I see like a beautiful shirt on a woman, I'll be like, wow, I noticed that because I like that thing. And I'm going to tell them, hey, I love your shirt. But if it's something that I don't really care much about, or it's just kind of mediocre, or I don't like it, I don't even notice. It's just like not a passing thought because I'm there to do my thing and to find whatever is on my shopping list, and I'm not there to look around and be judging other people. And it's just the same in reverse. Nobody's there nobody's out in the world to be looking at you. It's funny. It reminds me of when I was learning to drive. And again, 16 years old, I was struggling with anxiety. I don't know why, but I seemed to have this idea, and this is probably just my perspective on the world at the time, that all these other cars were going to try and hit me. And like, I was like dodging all the cars, and I was gripping the wheel so tight in the car with, the driver instructor also has a wheel. And he's like, whoa, like you need to relax, because the whole car was shaking because I'm like, ooh. And I think it was maybe my third or fourth time driving that I kind of realized, like, no one is trying to get into an accident here. Like, we're all just trying to get to our destination, and nobody is like out to get me on the road. But I just had this idea that I really had to like dodge all these other cars or I might get into an accident, which is just, it's such a funny perspective thinking back. Cause like no one is out there to get you. No one's out there to notice the bad things, you know?
Yeah, I'm so glad I grew out of my people watching phase. Right? I had some. It was fun for a while. I'm not gonna lie, but then I started to realize how foolish it was because you'd be, let's say, the airport. I'd be sitting there just watching. I'm like, what am I
Mm.
doing? Like no one is so important, right? And you just begin to realize a lot of that stuff doesn't matter. And to your point, I remember the driving example is such a good one because one of my a family friend is a driving instructor, and he tells me the same thing, that people think that everyone on the road is paying attention to him. He has to tell them, relax. It's just you and I in the car. No one is
Yeah.
trying to hit you. They're just trying to get where they're going to get and
Yeah.
survive.
I'm so glad to hear I'm not alone in that.
So as we close, Carleigh, what's some advice that you want to give to my audience just to help them along the journey and make sure that they're finding a way to overcome some of the depression, anxiety, and the mental health concerns that they may have?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, but I would say that no matter where you're at in your journey, no matter what it is that you're struggling with, healing has to begin with acceptance and acknowledgement. So it's recognizing, even if you're really struggling and you don't like where you are and you want to change that, it needs to begin with accepting where you are, bringing in self-love and compassion, and choosing to move forward from a place of desiring to feel better because you are worth feeling better. And when emotions come up, instead of feeling that kind of like, oh, I don't want to feel this, it's not nice, and pushing it down, allowing yourself to actually accept them so that you can process and release them, and then move forward with whatever it is that triggered that emotional response. So ultimately, my biggest piece of advice here is to accept yourself and your emotions so you can move forward from a place of clarity and love.